Good day, everyone. So hope you're doing really well. Emilie has released now in Genshin Impact, and a lot of people are pointing to future impact with the character, and they are making the bet that you should get the character now because something in Natlan's going to happen that will really work well with the character. So, I think let's just try and unpack all of this. So, obviously, I don't have Emilie, but I have seen a lot of players and like friends and YouTubers and theory crafters talk about the character. And from what I can surmise, and I stand under correction here, is that Emilie herself doesn't necessarily fit in as a new best in slot for some particular existing team archetype, nor is there a singular new team archetype that she unlocks where she is just irreplaceable. What I'm gathering is that Emilie can either be a solid alternative or like marginally better in some teams, but she is not knocking the park out, which is really why people speculate that as a character without any strong inherent support capabilities, and that's just focused on raw DPS or sub DPS, she is going to be much better suited towards some future mechanic. And obviously, I don't blame people for thinking like this because we've seen the implications of future impact like across Genshin Impact. So if you think back to the time that Kokomi was released, she was released and her balance in terms of her offense potential was a bit conservative. So this is what Hoyo loves doing. They release a character and then later on an artifact set, or let's say a 4-star character like Farazan for Shao and Wanderer, is released to then boost up a character. And this is actually a beautiful strategy if you think about it, because if we are conservative with the balance, we can always later on create and sell new characters that can fill in a vacuum and make all of the pieces of the puzzle fit together, or we can release enemy types, for instance, in Kokomi's case, like with the Rift Hounds, that really synergize well with the playstyle that you would be going for. So if I had to then bring back these parallels to what we saw with Kokomi, imagine them bringing out Kokomi, but all her attacks did double the damage it did, and then they released Ocean Youth Clam. It would have been a bit too much at the time, hence the strategy is let's balance conservatively and then power up later on. Now, whether this is going to work for Emilie or not, I literally cannot say, but I do think there is a good reason to think of this. So, in Genshin Impact, what you want to do as a company is you want to release characters, but you also want to understand that you can't just release strong characters like Nouvelette every patch, because what people are then going to grow accustomed to is the fact that if a new character isn't like feature rich or can power creep old characters, then I'm not going to pull on them, which is a very, very big problem. So it really is much better for Hoyo to say, listen, I'm going to release 1 or 2 really strong characters, take the profit for those characters and not really give them any support in the future, or I can release characters that are conservatively balanced and then get my profit for creating this character later on when I introduce more tools that will uplift this character and potentially just shake up the meta, rebalance the game, get some interest. I think this is a balancing act that Hoyo needs to do. They obviously need to make money, and one quick way to make money is just release stronger and stronger and stronger characters, but that's not sustainable. The other way is to release characters that are mid or that are perhaps slightly undertuned, and then later on release content that will suit those characters, because you're creating variety and longevity in the game, you're creating new challenges, which just then so happens to fit well with the character. A classic example of this is Yaemiko. She had the EM passive, and a lot of us were like looking at Yaemiko and thinking, what's the point of this? Because right now there is no real use. I think it's in 2.4, 2.5 for this EM passive. And when Kuki Shinobu came out, it was very, very clear that, yeah, something's going to happen during Sumru to really benefit of this. So that is my take on this. I think the whole idea of future impact just comes all down to what Hoyo gets in terms of their numbers, how popular characters are. I can definitely see a situation where, or foresee a situation where if a character is really profitable or popular, and could then be very profitable in future, that Hoyo could release support for that character, especially if the character was balanced more conservatively. But I can also foresee a situation where Hoyo is like, this is our 4.1, 4.2 premier patch, this is the time most people are going to play. I need to give them a strong reason, I need to give them a Nouvelette, I need to give them a Farina, they need to feel the power, it's got to be worth their while to play my game. I can understand the game from that strategy, but but there are obviously downsides and upsides to all of these things. It all comes down to the longevity in terms of your existing cast, when you want to get profit, and that's why these conversations are always interesting. So from my perspective, when we really boil it down to a score, depending on how popular Emilie is and how they might potentially design some of the future characters and what they expect to make in terms of content for Emilie, we could either see her being a real success come like post Natlan, or just a character that is there, it's an alternative, but is not really too groundbreaking. But knowing Hoyo, they'll probably do something for Emilie in the case of a 4-star or not. So yeah, that is the bulk of my thinking. I think that Genshin Impact is all about when they want to release their profit margins on characters that they've created, and that there are different ways of doing so by releasing characters in different power states. That's my interpretation of it. So that's what I've got to say in terms of the video. In terms of Kokomi herself, because we're a Kokomi main channel, I do think that if Hoyo ever wanted to capitalize on Kokomi in the future, a good way would be perhaps to target a niche 4-star character, or let's say new 5-star character that rewards you for having negative crit rates. I think that would be quite an interesting new niche that the game could develop. So imagine a 5-star character that reduces character's crit rate, and depending on the total amount of negative crit rates in the team, you get all sorts of interesting kinds of buffs. This would be quite a good example of where you don't need to push the damage ceiling that much higher with Kokomi because she can't crit, so you can very much control that without breaking the rest of the game. But perhaps you could add in an extra source of, let's say, true damage that could be dealt to opponents based on the amount of negative crit rate you've gotten. So you release a bunch of niche enemies with over 400 resistance and crazy defenses, and then you've got this true damage character that can deal with the enemy whilst the enemy is consistently debuffing you with bleed effects and so on. It's entirely possible to take something like Kokomi and make her great in the future, but in a niche scenario without affecting the game, and it's the same with Citron. I think one of the things that happened with Citron is that they didn't want to buff Nuvalet and Farina too much, because Citron synergizes really well with those two, and it's not because of the source water droplet and whatever. That constant healing keeps Nuvalet's HP pool up higher and higher, which means once he gets to that 80% threshold, he's going to do more in terms of his damage, which is really the power of what Citron provides, and then your off-field characters get a boost to their damage. It is crazy, but in that case, you don't want just to make stronger characters even stronger. You want to look at the niche of what Citron provides, and then perhaps in future get new characters or supports that can play into her playstyle and perhaps elevate it. What those might be, we don't know. Maybe Citron synergizes well with some of the Pyro or upcoming characters in that she doesn't give as much Hydro application, and the lack of Hydro application could be the benefit. I'm not sure. Look, this is all just speculation. But in any case, what is not speculation is that Hoyo, in some way or some form, always tries to uplift some of the older characters. They always try and shake up the meta in some way and form. I think until such a time that the game format, in other words, the Spiral Abyss and the Imaginarium Theatre, until those game formats are reworked so that you are rewarded for alternative clearing and combat conditions, we're still going to get a Bennett, Kazuha, Nahida, Farina heavy meta instead of really encouraging true diversity. At the moment, it's very artificial in that they restrict which characters you can play and how often you can play them in the Imaginarium Theatre. But in the future, having different content formats or combat formats can actually boost all the characters, and that might be another way or another lever towards balancing characters. So they might not be as strong in single target, but they might come out with a kit that favors a new mode, which is something that I can absolutely also see coming, which would once again just increase the longevity of the game, giving us a reason to keep on playing in a way which is healthy for the rest of the ecosystem. So yeah, that's quite a mouthful, but that's what I wanted to say about Emilie and future impact, and just some of the ideas that I've been brainstorming. Right, keep well, let me know what you think about all of this. Cheers.